Yo, this is Steve Bloom, and you're watching Moana Nui Podcast. We'll be starting soon. Don't go anywhere.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining the Moana Nui Podcast. This is Dana. Of course, I am not on video. Not quite yet. Hopefully, very, very soon. But we are very excited for this particular this week's podcast, which we're going to talk about addiction and coping with rain. So I'm very excited for us to jump into this conversation, and Moana will be joining us momentarily. Of course, she is dealing with traffic on the way home from work. So I'm going to have us kick this off with Shae. And of course, we're talking about addiction and coping. So my first thing I always go into is when we give in terms, a lot of times people have their own definition of what these different things can be. What is, as far as from your side of the world, Shae, as being a licensed therapist, what do you all consider as an addiction and the definition of what coping is?
So it's the way how addiction is defined clinically. Oh, hi everybody. The way we define addiction clinically is there has to be some kind of dependence, and it has to be that the person recognizes and has some kind of a limitation. So, for example, if this is an activity or practice or something that actually gets in the way of things that you have to do. So, on the questionnaire, for example, you'll see something like, if you will using this substance or engaging in this activity take precedence over eating or activities of daily living, or will it get in the way of your ability to pay your rent, things like that. So especially, which is why I had to backtrack. So if your addiction is food, no, it's not going to get in the way of eating, but it might get in the way of you leaving the house to go to work so that you can pay your bills. Things like that is what we're looking at when it comes to addiction. It's going to be a behavior or a series of behaviors that keep you from being able to truly enjoy your life.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of times all of us, as far as I call it a loose version of addiction. Like you'll hear people like, I'm addicted to coffee. I have to have it every morning. I will not be able to function if I don't have my coffee every morning. But is that considered as a true addiction of something like coffee
Actually,
versus
it can.
anything else? It can. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually in the DSM-5. It's in there. Coffee is in there because chemically speaking, you always catch me off guard with these.
Grady always comes in the clutch.
So you can be addicted to, let's say, for example, coffee, because you will actually get that headache. And that headache is an indication of the chemical dependence. So you're actually having a withdrawal symptom. That is also on the list of indicators that you have an addiction, is withdrawal symptoms when you don't have it. So for example, when it's not a chemical addiction like coffee or cigarettes, or I should say when it's not a typical chemical addiction, because to a certain extent, what happens with addictions is that it is triggering or not triggering certain brain chemicals. So I guess to a certain extent, it would be unfair to call some addictions not chemical. But anyway, so what we're talking about there is shopping, for example, which has a completely different name, but bear with me. So if you are addicted to shopping, there is a chemical that is triggered in your brain when you are not getting that quote unquote fix. And it can keep you from actually being able to function in your daily life. For example, you will spend your rent money in order to buy another whatever, or hoarding, for example. Also, technically, under a completely different kind of classification. But when it comes to hoarding, it's you are compelled to do this thing that there's a part of you that knows you don't necessarily want to, and it impedes the rest of your life. So let's say you're hoarding newspapers. You've got stacks and stacks and stacks of newspapers all around. You know that if someone comes into your home and sees these several stacks of newspapers, they're going to know your big secret. And so you stop people from coming, and you also stop going outside, and you stop interacting socially because you have this big secret, so to speak, because most of the time it's a secret that you don't necessarily want to share, or don't necessarily want to have to actively hide, so to speak. So it limits your life in that respect, if that makes sense. So these are the kinds of non-chemical addictions, again, completely classified differently, but they're kind of similar in that way, where there is a compulsion to do or behave or engage in an activity that you would actually rather not, but can't help yourself but do.
Now, with those ones, Shae, are those tied to the chemical thing as well, or is that different?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Some of them, now, again, because let's say, for example, you have the newspaper thing, that the hoarding part, right? There is a chemical in your brain. It's not the same, which is why it's classified differently. Let me be very clear. I'm sorry. So it's kind of like where with let's say a typical chemical addiction, we're looking at where your brain is compelled to crave this chemical. Let's say it's alcohol. So you are an alcoholic. So your brain is dependent on alcohol for quote unquote functioning. Now, mind you, our definitions of functioning are going to be very different, because there are some people who are actually high functioning alcoholics, and some who think that functioning just requires them to be able to sit there with their eyes open. So it just depends. And I don't mean to make light of it, because it's very
No,
serious.
I'm sorry. I'm just
right?
laughing
But
because
it's. I mean, I'm. My delivery is supposed to be humorous, but it is a very serious situation.
Right.
Alcoholism and addiction are very serious, and it's so important to understand, because there's a lot of times where, you'll look at a situation and think, oh, this person must be an alcoholic. Well, That's where we get the functioning alcoholic concept from, because they can actually truly function, whereby they go to work, they pay their bills, they engage in the rest of daily activities. It just so happens that they start drinking as soon as they wake up. So instead of their quote unquote morning coffee, like the coffee addicts would have, they have their morning shot, which, believe me, I have heard people say, I cannot function without my shot of whiskey in the morning. I had a patient who said exactly that, and they go to work and they engage in their chosen field, and they apparently are very good at what they do, and they are functioning alcoholics. It just so happens that this particular person also was orange and their eyes were yellow, and they basically looked like an Oompa Loompa at this point because their kidneys had failed. So yes, they are functioning on the outside, but their organs are failing because they are drinking alcohol all day, every day, constantly, in order to so-called function.
Yeah.
So this is what we call chemical dependency, because this is a chemical that your body does not actually want. And maybe some of you, oh, yes, we'll get into that when we're talking about coping. Thank you, Brad, Arnie. So yeah, you'll find that kind of chemical dependency. But when we're talking about the other chemicals, when I say it's kind of not fair to call one thing a chemical dependency and not the other, it's because when we're talking about compulsion and obsessive compulsive behaviors like hoarding, there are brain chemicals involved similar to the ones that are involved when it comes to drinking or smoking, whether it's cigarettes or marijuana. Yes, I've heard all of the everything that says you cannot be addicted to marijuana. That is a lie. In the same way you can literally get addicted to drinking water or walking several thousand miles a day, you can get addicted to marijuana. So, sorry, not sorry. Hard to swallow pills.
Yeah.
It is a thing. Your brain can literally get addicted to just about anything if you allow it to, or if you have that propensity. I don't know what to tell you. And then there's the other side where some of these things are emotional addictions. So you're constantly engaging in an activity because it triggers some of those brain chemicals, for example, the hoarding and so forth. We call those, technically they're considered emotional or emotionally based addictions or behaviors, because there's the emotional component to why you're engaging in it against technically your own will. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, just making sure. I feel like I just said a lot, but I'm not sure if I actually answered the original question.
Yeah, you did. So, okay, so my dad, he was an alcoholic, and there was times where he was able to stop, but then he started again. He would stop and he was successfully, free of alcohol for 2 years, but then he would start again. I think part of it was boredom, but I found that initially for him it was kind of his coping mechanism, I guess, being a Vietnam vet and kind of dealing with some of those ghosts that haunt you from those experiences. But so I found it interesting, when he would have the times, then he would be able to stop between alcohol and nicotine for cigarettes. But I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on what helps people to stop, and then what triggers it back? Does it all go back to the chemicals, and are there things that other influences?
It's one of those things that can be really hard, I think, because to a certain extent the medical, clinical, psychiatric community doesn't necessarily agree on this.
Mm.
So when I'm talking to people who are addicted to whatever, I explain things like this because that's why when we were talking about it, I guess pre-production, that's why it said addiction and coping, because when I explain the behavior to people who are actively in it, and I have to explain it this way because I do not have addiction. Specifically, I do not have alcohol or drug addiction or nicotine addiction. Okay. So it's really important for me to say that so that people can understand that I explain things in this way to help other people understand themselves kind of from the outside looking in a more general sense outside of it. Because even when in my personal life, my mouth might say things that my professional self don't agree with, because there are those times, I do have that little voice in the back of my head that says things like, you're lying, right? So I explain it in these terms so that we can both, meaning both my professional self and my personal self or whatever, can agree. And so I explain it like this. If you have a container, okay, this is a container. Let's imagine that this right here is bad stuff, negativity, right? And as human beings, we have a tendency to see the bad stuff and be like, nope, this is mine. I don't want to share this. I don't want anybody to see it. I'm going to act like, this is an invisible thing that nobody can do. But we still, knowing that this is that, we do this. Usually behind closed doors where nobody can see us, we are still holding on to and engaging in the bad thing, right? And I don't mean the bad thing being the drinking. I know I just took a drink, but bear with me. I'm talking about this just being negative experiences, okay? Let's say this is your bad day. Let's say this is the moment of abuse that you experienced in a relationship that has since ended and you decided you're now over it. Okay, this is the boss who irks your freaking nerves, or in your case, Dana, the employee who irks your nerves, right? That's what this is, okay? So you take this and you hold on to it, and every so often you take a drink, right? Let's say, for example, that we just keep on putting stuff in the bad cup and we keep on holding on to the bad cup, right? Eventually it's going to spill over, right? When you put stuff, whether good or bad, into a container, notice it's not bottomless.
Yeah.
Okay. Our emotional selves are not bottomless. We have a capacity. We can only hold but so much. And so every so often we do have to take a drink, right? Or so we think. But on top of that, what we do with this is, okay, this does not taste good because it's negative. It's bad. We're holding on to it and it's heavy. So on occasion, we need something to help cope with, we'll say, the flavor of this. That's where the coping mechanisms can come in. You want to cope with the bad day, you come home and maybe you have a glass of wine. Or if you're a person with addiction, you'll have a bottle or 3 of wine. Maybe you'll have what I have discovered is a handle. Didn't know what a handle was until I started working where I'm working. A handle is, if I'm not mistaken, correct me wrong, internet people. A handle is a pint, if I'm not mistaken. No, more than a pint of liquor. And people drink this all in one sitting. As a matter of fact, I had a patient who had 7 of these a day. That is more water than I have ever had in a day. Even on the hottest day, I could not imagine drinking 7 pints of water. This person is having that a day of liquor, okay? Now, this person also had several glasses of negative things that they were trying to cover up. the taste of the negativity with. Or perhaps we're talking about cocaine. And so you take however much cocaine to dull the senses and the feelings of that negativity that you've been experiencing. Or maybe we're talking about pills or nicotine or food or shopping or whatever. We take this to cover the flavor of this. Now, thank you. Imagine if instead of holding on and we'll say hoarding the glass of negativity, we decided to share that. Hey, Moana, I'm having a bad day. Or, because I'm biased like that, we talk to a therapist about these horrible things that we go through on a daily basis so that we're not holding on to this glass of negativity. Instead of choosing the more socially acceptable thing to cover the taste of the bad experiences, we actually poured some of it out. Not into ourselves, but outside of ourselves. Maybe allowed someone else to hold on to some of those things instead of us holding on to them ourselves. Which of those things, at least on a logistical basis, makes more sense? Now, even the longest standing addict so far, Mr. I had 7 handles a day.
Jesus.
Okay, Mr. I had 7 handles a day for the last 3 years of my life. I'm like, how are you still standing? But anyway,
280 shots a day. Holy crap.
Okay. So even that person was able to say, yeah, that makes sense. If they weren't holding on to all the stuff, if they weren't drinking, trying to cover, trying to mask, trying to hold the negativity down with the liquor or with the drugs or with the whatever it is that you're choosing to use as your coping mechanism, would you not have to drink less, maybe? Would you not have at least one less thing to compel you towards that activity? Yeah, it might be easier to not drink or to stay sober or what have you if I didn't just hold on to this thing. So when I'm talking, or when you ask me about your dad and why he would have these times of sobriety followed by non-sobriety, if he never took the time to actually deal with whatever brought him to drinking in the first place, if he was always holding on to the atrocities that he had to bear witness to in the Vietnam War, if he never had a safe place to put that, not giving an excuse, but that's kind of why that happens, where after 2 years of greatness, you come upon a trigger and it's just like, you know what?
Yeah.
I gotta take this down. Let me go back to trying to function. That's how that works. That's how that happens. I shouldn't say works because technically it doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
That's the whole the whole point of that, is that it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
If it did work, you could, let's say, drink it down and then it would go out with the next day's piss, like if it did work, that's how it would go. But it doesn't. Instead, it just stays there, continuing to simmer and fester and bubble up and bubble over while the liquor runs through you, while the drugs run its course, while the food no longer fills you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which is why therapy is important.
I mean, maybe. What do I know?
No, for sure.
That's that. But that is the thing. And that's one of those things where, I've had folks come in where, they've done all the rehab and they go to the meetings, and after a meeting, they'll go and drink, or after going and spending 30 to 60 days in a rehab facility or rehab program, they come out and they go right back to using.
Right.
And it's because, yes, they've learned all the tools in the rehab about dealing with the addiction, but they themselves never actually addressed what got them there in the first place. Maybe they just sat in the meetings and they just talked about drinking. Man, I really wanted to drink today and I didn't drink today. I was bored, so I wanted to drink today, but I didn't. And then they get that instant gratification, the pat on the back of good job for not drinking.
Right.
Even though there's absolutely no liquor here and it's really hard to get because you're in a facility. Still, good job for not quitting or quitting, whatever, right? But then they get out and the temptation is there. They don't have that instant gratification of someone patting them on the back, and the liquor is readily available or the drugs are readily available. And whatever it is that got them to the drinking and the drugs in the first place will continue happening. The answer to that question is absolutely yes. Not only if they don't want to quit, but also if they are not ready to quit. So if a person, let's say, for example, Moana, just because you gave us that example, your dad, right? If you guys, your family had gone and said, nope, you're going to rehab, and you forced them into rehab, you dropped them off into a rehab program, great. So now he's going to spend those same 30 days. I didn't drink today. Everybody pats him on the back. Then he calls home. I still haven't had a drink. You guys pat him on the back. He gets out. Great. Now I can get back to my drinking.
Right.
On the other hand, if the person decides that they're ready, right? And let me be very clear. Just because they decide they're ready doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. But at the very least, they still have to make that decision. That's when the support comes in. Because the support is also going to come in with dealing with whatever got them to drinking in the first place. So, yeah. That is absolutely true, Brad. So, yes, it is true to a certain extent that people can be addicted to relationships for the emotional highs. But I don't want to say that people can be addicted to relationships. They are addicted to the emotional high. There is a difference that seems only semantic, but it is very important to recognize that it's not necessarily the relationship, because it's not the person, right? Every relationship that you have is different. And if you are having literally the same relationship over and over again, but with different people, that's because you're not paying attention to who you're with. Just throwing that out there. Because you are never with the same person and you're supposed to be growing. So technically in that relationship, you're not supposed to be the same person that you were in the last relationship. So if you're having the same relationship over and over again, there's a whole different kind of problem there. I digress. So they're not necessarily addicted to relationships. They're addicted to the emotional high. So that honeymoon phase that they call it, that bliss where you're on the phone all the time, or these days where you're texting all the time and you're liking each other's pictures every minute and you're going places and you're having fun, or you're not going places and you're having fun. That kind of thing, you can be addicted to that part of the experience, and then you are no longer as committed, so to speak, to the relationship as soon as that part is over. And so you go looking for that part of the relationship again, which really only exists at the beginning of a relationship. Does that make sense? So you're looking for just that part, because once you get used to each other, you're not going to have that same level of excitement, that same level of newness. Once you're through the new part, it's not new anymore. And so you don't get that.
Yeah.
And so that, isn't there. So it's not the relationship that they're addicted to. It's just the emotional high.
Yeah.
I hope that answered the question.
That makes sense.
But I want to also talk a little bit more, unless we get another question, about the coping part of it, because
definitely.
I got my little get therapy plug in there, so I'm satisfied with that part. But it's so important that we also get to talk about coping mechanisms in general, because I also think it's important, or at least my professional self believes that it is important to mention that if you are still here, whatever coping mechanism you have chosen worked. So I know that I just said a few minutes ago, technically the drinking doesn't work. I know I said that. But at the same time, on an emotional level, if you are still here, if you are still alive today, and your coping mechanism has led you to addiction, it's okay. It got you this far. But if you are listening to me right now is a good time to explore some other options, because you do have them. And sometimes the reason why you have chosen that not so productive option is because you didn't know that you had another option. So if you're hearing me today and you are one with addiction, please understand, congratulations for making it this far despite your addiction. Today is a good day to try something else. And if you're not going to try talking to a therapist, if you have a dog, talk to the dog. As a matter of fact, hug the dog first, because dogs get annoyed too.
It's true.
Okay? Try something else. That's a great question. Can a person use the emotional high as a coping mechanism for loneliness? Sure. But is that really what they're doing? I don't know. It depends on the circumstance. Because if you are experiencing loneliness, it doesn't necessarily matter if someone's there or not. Have you ever been lonely in a room full of people?
Yes.
You can be experiencing a deep loneliness and be getting the emotional high fix and still be lonely. So what you're treating or coping with isn't necessarily the actual loneliness. It's something else. It's probably depression. It's probably some other emotion that you're actually coping with and using that emotional high to avoid the emotional low of depression. And by the way, you can be experiencing loneliness and not be depressed. So those things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Just like you can not be lonely and be depressed.
Right.
So I'm not sure if that's really, I don't want to say that the answer is absolutely not. It's just not very likely to be the case. At least not in and of it, like as a whole. think that answers the question. Loneliness is a really interesting sentiment. Loneliness speaks to our baser instincts.
Mhm.
Our baser instincts as human beings is to be in community.
Yeah.
We are social beings. And, there's a lot of people out there who strongly believe that they don't actually need other people, that they don't need community, right? And that is largely inaccurate. I'm not going to say untrue, but it's inaccurate. You might not need a lot of people, but as a human being, you will require connecting with at least one other in order to get that human basic need fulfilled. Does that make sense?
Yep. Absolutely.
There are those people out there who are super gregarious and they're a lot social and they don't feel like they're having a good day unless they've talked to 50 people.
Oh, Lord.
And then there are people like me who's just like, okay, I've had enough humaning for the day.
Yes. Yes.
Close the blinds. Cocoon myself on the couch and
You're right. Everybody leave me be.
that's it. I'm good with the humans for now. So it can totally go either way, but there's a thing that we've been poorly informed as it relates to our human relationships, because we have this very imbalanced perspective of all or nothing. We think, oh, we either have to be super social or we have to be antisocial, or we have to be I just forgot the word that we use, but we have to be either this or that.
Mm.
And that's not really the case. There's a thing of balance, and what balances our individual scales are, of course, strongly based on our experiences and biology and things like that. But, like I said, I have my limits, and then I get to cocoon myself for a week or two, and then, and I can go back and be social again. And then there are those people who have to be social every day or they don't feel like they're being themselves. My scale is different from their scale. Neither one of those scales is incorrect, right? That's just one of the things that makes us special, that makes each one of us our own personal snowflakes that we still have to learn and explore and figure out. So when we're talking about loneliness and experiencing loneliness and how to cope with loneliness, a lot of times people look at other people's scale and wonder why they can't exist on that level.
Right.
I don't have 50,000 friends. There must be something wrong with me, because when I'm around 50,000 people, I'd much rather be in a cocoon by myself, right? Like they have that kind of experience and then they think, oh, there's something wrong with me. No, your scale just wasn't meant for 50,000 people. Or why do I need 50,000 people? It must mean that there's something wrong with me. Now, regular old everyday Shae, it's like, yes, there's something wrong with you. And please leave me alone in my cocoon because I don't want to be one of your 50,000 people, right? But clinical Shae says, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Your scale just requires more people than mine. And I'd much rather prefer you go find more people like you and keep me off of your scale, thanks. Right?
Yes, I truly appreciate the friends that I can sit in silence with and there is no awkwardness.
Yes.
Like we could just be in the cocoon together.
Yep. Well, you can be in your cocoon, I can be in my cocoon in
Yes.
the same space and not breaching each other's cocoons and still feel
Right.
comfortable.
Right. Yep.
Some time ago, I got on the elevator at work and there was one other person on the elevator and they were just like, well, this is awkward now. And I'm like, why? And so now they're trying to have a whole conversation with me. And I'm just like, I'm only going like 3 floors. Like, what is this for? But of course, I work here. They did not. So it's like, I now have to engage with this person who, for some strange reason, is feeling super awkward just because they're no longer on the elevator by themselves.
Right.
Which, of course, then made me wonder what they were doing on the elevator by themselves, but that's neither here nor there. What were you really doing? Why is this awkward for you?
Right.
Did I interrupt something? Sir,
Oh, God.
I'll get off the elevator if you need more alone time. But but no, it's really important that we recognize that we all have different needs and we all have different scales.
Yeah.
I think that's working. Yeah, scales. We all have different levels in order to create our balance. You know, if you are a person who can say, okay, I can do the human thing 3 days, and then on the 4th day I must rest because I am not, God of the Bible who could go a full 6 days and then wait until the 7th to rest. Like,
right.
I'm not that kind of magical, right? You understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't have that energy. I don't have that many spoons. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure Christian God made the spoons, supposedly. And so that's why they had so many to spare. I'm not that guy. I'm just a regular old human being. You got maybe 2 days before I need a cocoon time.
Same.
Right? And then there are those who are just like, nope, I need 30 days. I got 30 days of spoons. And this is what we're doing for these 30 days. And when they don't, and on the 31st day, if that is the thing, or on the 29th or whatever day, there isn't someone else there to spend those spoons on. And then they experience loneliness. Even though they just had 28 straight days of spoon spending. If that they have that one day, they get that loneliness. I do not understand, and I cannot, or well, I do understand, but I cannot resemble that sentiment. But I can understand why you might have it. It doesn't mean that there's something necessarily wrong with you. It's just you got to find places to use those spoons. So, to the statement of emotional highs as coping mechanism for loneliness, I want to reiterate the part where it really just depends on what your loneliness looks like. Mm-hmm. Where does your loneliness come from? How do you define loneliness? Are you experiencing loneliness when you're in a room full of people? For those of us who have experienced it, a lot of times that's because we're in a room full of people who don't actually match our energy.
Yep.
You know, they have that other energy that doesn't really mesh in the way that we need it to in that moment. There are those who experience loneliness in the form of, I am spending time alone with my thoughts and my thoughts are scary. I need something to get me away from these thoughts or from these sounds or from these experiences or from these memories or whatever they have. And so they believe that they're experiencing loneliness. And this is how they define their loneliness.
GT.
You know? You are on it today, sir. Usually you only get me like the one time and then I'm paying attention. I got nothing for that.
Oh, Lord.
I don't know what to tell you to do with your big dick energy. I got nothing. I am so glad that you have that. I'm gonna drink to that.
Take your sip.
That's all I got.
Oh man.
I need another question because I don't even know what I was saying a minute ago. Yes, I'm broken now. Yes, I got nothing.
Oh,
I'm gonna just sit here and wait for my cocoon time. All I got is okay.
Oh man. All right, so maybe this is a good time for this question. So
yes, please. It's a good time for any question right about now.
She's like, anything, give me something, sis. So like in your practice, what is the most common addiction that you've seen?
That's a really good question. Here where I am, chemicals. It's the drinking. It's the drinking and the drugs. It's the chemicals. Pretty even. Although I will say what I wasn't expecting, I didn't know that heroin was still in style. But apparently heroin is alive and kicking around these parts. And so that is a thing that I wasn't expecting, but have learned now that heroin is a big deal. Where I was before, and since y'all are aware that I was in Atlanta. So in Atlanta, the biggest addiction that I saw there was actually cocaine, even more so than liquor, which is interesting to me because liquor is so readily available. I was totally expecting more alcoholics.
Right.
Nope. Cocaine. In Atlanta, apparently it really is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is very crazy. I feel like now is a good time to say that whatever you choose as your coping mechanism, if you do not feel that it is, or if you can't tell whether or not it is limiting your life, fair. If you are finding that that you can't tell if your addiction is actually getting in the way of your life, if you have to ask the question, kind of like, you know, when they say, if you have to ask how much it is, you can't afford it. If you have to ask the question, it's probably getting in the way of something. Maybe not like in a debilitating level, but if you have to ask the question, it's probably getting in the way of something, and you might want to check. Yeah, I picked that up. I can definitely understand that sentiment. I don't understand how, and this is personal Shae, right? Regular old civilian, non-clinical Shae. there are those times where I look at folks, especially anybody around my age or younger, who picks up random drug number 5. I want on one level to ask why.
Right.
Like, how did that become an option? Like in the days of Barbara Bush saying, just say no, and this is your brain, and this is your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
Like all of those, like it's got really bad marketing. Of all the things that you could choose, you chose crack or cocaine, or like how? Even cigarettes, I have to question, because what is it? Is it truth.com or just truth? Like those commercials where you would see like the weird, like it would be like a whole street full of people, and then it would just be that one person who's okay, and then it would be like this many people died of whatever today, and then it would be like brought to you by the Americans Against Cancer Society or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those truth commercials were really, really impacting, although at the moment I can't exactly remember any of them. Oh wait, there was that one with the I work in a hospital. I deal with people who have these every day, and I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, the throat, the hole in the throat where she had to talk, and she sounded like a robot.
Oh,
yeah, truth.org. So those commercials, that commercial with that lady, and I think eventually they had a new commercial with a similar thing, but at the end it was just like she died on this day, because she got throat cancer, and so she had the throat tube thing. Yeah, those commercials, I mean, they worked on me. It's like, actually, my mom's programming worked on me. She used to show me people on the train in New York growing up as a kid who would just be like, and I imagine now they were probably regular old homeless people, but she would say things like, see, that's what would happen. That's what's going to happen to you if you take drugs. It's really great programming. Show a person who is basically laying in their own piss and toothless and dirty, tell them that's how drugs work. It's a great way to stop kids from doing drugs. At least it's a great way to stop a kid like me from doing drugs, because that's just not what I wanted for my life, and so I didn't do them. But I just wonder sometimes about that when I'm not thinking with my clinical brain, because I know how the drug attraction can work. All it takes is that one time, that one brief moment of I wonder, and then the decision to actually follow through with trying it, to go from being someone who's just like, I'll never even try it, to I guess I can. I'm not saying you definitely will get addicted immediately, but it really only takes the one time to decide to try something before you realize that this is a thing that you can do. So I do understand it from a clinical perspective, but regular Shae, I'm just like, have you never, like, did nobody ever show you the homeless, toothless person as a kid?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the homeless, toothless people at the hospital where I work. I'm just like, see, so mom was right. She wasn't completely lying. Not that all of the homeless, toothless people in the hospital are drug addicts. It's just a lot of them are.
Yeah.
And yes, it is a lot scary to me how people, serious, although my delivery might be a little humorous. I was speaking with someone today, and actually no, yesterday I was talking to a patient the other day, and I had to seriously explain, you're here because you almost died. This isn't the first time you've been here. So we have to acknowledge the fact that the reason why you had those drinks is because you wanted to die. At which point the patient said, yeah, I can admit that now. It's scary because maybe in the moment, on a conscious level, you don't recognize that the reason you're doing this thing is because there's a part of you that wants to die.
Mm.
There's a part of you that no longer wants to have to consciously deal with life. There's a part of you that believes that another moment on this plane is too unbearable, that you cannot literally survive another moment without this thing, feeling these feelings, experiencing these experiences. It's scary to imagine that your experiences can get that desperate.
Yeah.
And to those of you who are out there who are having that as a part of your truth, whether it is a conscious truth or a subconscious truth, you know, number one, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had to go through whatever it is that you've gone through that has brought you to this moment.
Mm.
And I hope, for your sake and the sake of the rest of the world, that you find a way to cope with whatever it is that brought you to this moment so that you can get through the next ones. I acknowledge that it is scary and unpleasant. I just hope that you can give us, that being the rest of the world, a chance to show you something better.
Mm. Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with everything, a lot of the things going on right now, it's unfortunately, I can only see that rising, right?
The only positive thing about that is, as my mom says, you'll always have work to do.
It's true. We will always need therapists to talk us off the ledge.
I'll always have work to do. But, it's my own personal pet project to talk myself out of a job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
This was a serious one.
It is. No, it really is. I mean, it's
Serious one. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, on some of my harder days, when I have a patient who I've given the counseling to, and I've met the parents and the family, and I've had conversations, and we've gotten the rehab, and we've set up the everything, and the day of that they're supposed to be going into the program, they disappear.
Yeah.
Those are those days when I'm just like, I need to get away from addicts. I can't do this. This is too much. It's too much. It's too much disappointment. It's hard. Addiction is hard. I will never again truly believe that addiction is the easy way out, because it is hard. You're not just watching yourself suffer. You are watching your loved ones suffer. You are watching everyone around you suffer with you. You are experiencing all of the bad things that you experienced, and you're holding all of that in, and you're feeling all of that, and you are, at least in that moment, incapable of figuring out that you could actually let that go. You don't have the capacity when you're in addiction to recognize that this is something that you don't have to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be your bag. It doesn't have to define you. You would it requires, as I was explaining to my mom the other day, especially for an adult, it requires redefining your entire self change, whether it's addiction or anything else. Change, switching your thought patterns or changing your mind about something can often result in realizing that you would actually have to redefine your entire self. If I am no longer an addict, then who am I? If I am no longer a this, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
If I can no longer engage with these people in the way that I have gotten used to engaging, and they can no longer engage with me in the way they have gotten used to engaging with me, who am I? What do I do? It's quote unquote easier to continue in the same path than face the possibility of having to actually redefine your entire self.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, it is. So for people who are going through addiction, or even the loved ones who are trying to help someone seek help, like what's the best way to be supportive without, like, I know it's hard, like feeling like you're pressuring them? Because, like if you force someone, we talked about it a little bit. If you force someone, then it, the resistance makes it even worse. So I don't know if there's are any best practices in terms of trying to help someone who's in your circle who might be struggling with this.
Love them and love yourself anyway. And that's not something that's in the books. I can actually almost guarantee that, professionally speaking, that is not the advice I'm supposed to give. I'm fairly certain that's not what I'm supposed to say. But what I've seen is people with addiction experience an inordinate amount of shame. They're constantly blaming themselves for what they're doing.
Yeah.
I've spoken to people who have been through unimaginable horrors, things that I have not myself gone through, but hearing them have kept me up at night. Unimaginable horrors, to the point of apparently it is imaginable, but it's just so horrid. I had a client who witnessed their mother being beaten to death at 5. Their mother being beaten to death. That is so weird. I just heard my own echo. Like a replay.
Sorry.
Like an instant replay. Yeah. That is what they lived through at 5.
Man.
What happened to them was not their fault. At 5, what could you have possibly done when 2 adults are going at it?
Mm-hmm.
What could they have possibly done? And at 5, they decided that the reason why this happened to their parent was because they weren't strong enough. And so they spent the rest of their lives, and this particular patient or client was 65. So he's about 67 now. 65 when we started. And they were still dealing with this feeling of guilt and shame. That's 60 years worth of guilt and shame.
That's crazy.
and not being able to accept themselves and having other people, being disappointed in them, and just an entire lifetime of shame and guilt starting from watching that happen. So yeah, when I look at those situations and I listen to all of the other stories, the only consistent thing I can truly suggest is that you remind them that whatever it is that brought them there isn't their fault, that they should love themselves anyway, and that you'll love them regardless. You'll get angry and you'll be disappointed, but that you will love them anyway.
Yeah. I think I would have to agree with that. That's when I, supported my dad. It was those days where, like I told him, like I can't imagine what you're going through, but you're my dad and I'm going to love you anyway. Like if you need help, let's get you some help, but I don't want to force you to do anything either. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. All right, guys. Well, this was a very tough topic today, tougher than I thought it was going to be. It's very heavy. But I hope that if you're watching this, you got some value. And I hope that you all know that you're loved. It's so important. And if you feel like you need to talk about it, I would definitely recommend therapy. Shae is awesome. Whether it's Shae or someone in your, where you live, seek out help. It's okay. Don't feel ashamed of asking for help, because no one can live this life without help. So hopefully you got some of that from this episode. And you never know, we may bring it up again, even though it's a heavy topic. We deal with the heavy on this show. But yes.
Go watch some cartoons or some anime or something. Lighten it up.
Yes. Well, we will lighten it up on the next show for sure. But yes, how can we book?
To book a virtual appointment with me, hit up these ladies over here if you're watching. They know how to get in contact with me, and they can forward me the message. You can also find me on Facebook. My page, Shae Athena Reigns, LMSW. I think the little piece of link after Facebook is SDA Reigns. There's also Reino Change at Reino Change on all the platforms. What's that? The Twitter, Insta. There's another one that I'm forgetting. I'm on there too. Whatever it is, they're all at Reino Change.
GD, get yourself. That's 3 times today.
I hate you with love, sir. I hate you loving me.
Oh, JD.
Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a good night.
Yes. Seriously though. No, thank you all for joining. We always appreciate having Ray coming on and talking about the hard stuff with us. So once again, hope you guys got some value out of it. Tune in again in about 10 minutes. We are going to liven it up, bring it back to the happier side with our independent creator series with Mal's Corner. And tonight we have Stronghold with guests Greg Elise and Jason Reeves. So join us for then. But until next time. Yes, Dana, it did lighten the mood. Until on Rain Talks. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. I know it's tough, at least for me, to have an Independence Day because of recent things that have happened. But I hope you all find some time to get some relaxation in, find your cocoon, or if you are the one who loves the social engagement, go out and be a social butterfly with all your peeps. Alrighty. Take care, everybody, and we will talk to you all soon.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, was a freedom then, when they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves a republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if you put Hawaii in a perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course. Cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
I'm Steve Bloom. I've been a voice actor for more than 30 years, playing characters like Wolverine, Starscream, Tank Dempsey from Call of Duty.
With Bloomfox Studios, I've learned so much about myself.
Learning to breathe, to no fear, to getting ugly in front of the mic.
One of the biggest changes I've noticed, at least for me, is how much my confidence level has gone up.
I've done an Eastern European video game, an e-commerce commercial, a documentary. If you're thinking about getting into voiceover, just do it. Jump in.